Okay, 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 okay. So, today's podcast. Today was a podcast I've been looking forward to for quite a long time. I met this man 2 years ago now, just over 2 years. And again, he was one of those fellas that kind of stood out for me as having stories that you weren't going to get in too many other places. His name is Kevin Sweeney. He was a lecturer in my college, but before that he was a guard for 20 odd years, and he actually made it into what's called Special Branch. And for those of you who don't know, Special Branch is an elite division of An Garda Síochána. It's a very delicate division, it's a very important division. It deals with issues of national security, in other words, terrorism. And a lot of people would sort of disregard that in Ireland. Oh, the troubles are over. You know, terrorism is for America and France and Britain to worry about. But, it doesn't happen here. Ireland is actually a little, not a haven, but it's a place where people can come and go quite easily. And they can meet people from different parts of the world here. And there is an underbelly to terrorism that takes place in Ireland that a lot of people are totally oblivious to. But Ireland has its fair share of high-level terrorism. So he was first of all in the military, then joined the Guards, and eventually made it into Special Branch. And obviously he can't talk about what went on in Special Branch, the missions he was involved with, but he talks about his lifestyle and how it affected him on a personal level. And it struck me how much he's sacrificed for his job. Not just his time and his energies and his emotions, but I suspect a lot more in his personal life that he can't disclose and that he won't disclose. And it reminds me that people sacrifice a lot more than what's on the surface. And you can't assume the road open for anyone. A lot of the time there's hard work and sacrifice and pain and sadness. But it also reminds me of a concept I've been thinking about for a while now, which is that we've always paid big corporations like Sony, Disney, Fox, Pixar, Netflix, New Time Cinema. We have all these corporations that provide us this entertainment, and we pay for other people's stories, or we pay for made up stories. And people often criticize social media and smartphones that it's separating us from human contact and it's drawing us apart. But I've often felt that social media, particularly things like podcasting, actually gives you the opportunities to derive entertainment from real stories and from people who've actually been there. And it opens up the opportunity for the everyday man to tell his tale, because life in general is actually very important and very eventful to each individual, and there's monumental moments in life that is often disregarded and often isn't given the credence or the notoriety that it deserves. And it makes you wonder how many old people have gone on their deathbed in their last few days or weeks and gone, no one's going to find out about that. I remember when this happened, and I remember I predicted that, but no one would listen to me, or my opinion wasn't heard on this, or, I always wonder if people had just thought like this, it could have been different. And I do wonder how many times they die with memories and secrets that at the very least could have provided entertainment for, or the baseline for a movie or a story or a single podcast episode. And it's something I've been really enjoying about podcasts, is that it's given the everyday person the chance to be the star of their own movie, to be able to look through their life and pick out elements that are engaging, that are fascinating, that are entertaining, that are educational, and these insights are valuable. And they're priceless, because a lot of them are insights that you couldn't get unless you lived that life. But we only have one life, and we don't have time to live all the different experiences out there. And this is why deriving insights from stories and things like reading and being educated and understanding history and the context of the different eras is actually so important. It adds more layers to the depth of understanding that we carry. Okay, but once again, I'm rambling. 17 minutes of a ramble. I can probably barely use 3 minutes of this. I may let it stretch a little bit. There's a few bits in there I want to get in. But anyway, Rambleland, episode 6 with Kevin Sweeney. Kevin, hello.
Tim,
how are you?
I'm good.
Thank you very much for coming on. You were my first, what I would declare, fully fledged professional that I've had on here. I've had some fighters, I've had a psychologist, I've had a religious, don't want to say fanatic, but fundamental. I've had a few different people on, but you're someone now who's you've come through life, as it were.
Yeah, I'm almost at the other side.
No, you're not at the other side yet. You've still got a good bit of life left in you. So for a bit of context, you are my criminology lecturer who used to be in the Guards. So I'll start off with how was your corona? How was in the last couple of months been for you?
Very little difference actually in my personal life in terms of, I can't go to coffee shops. Bit of a bummer. But other than that, no big deal. Obviously from a teaching point of view, it's a big difference, But I kind of have seen, or rather taken advantage of it as well, because it's kind of forced me to trim a lot of the fat off my lectures. Not that there was any fat you're saying, but I could rant on for 2 or 3 hours, go off on a tangent and be gone. And
you're always good for your tangents.
Could be gone for quite some time. Whereas I'm limited in terms of what I have to say now, and I've only an hour, less than an hour, because you can't keep people online for any longer than that. So I kind of have to cut it down to the core, which isn't a bad thing, so sometimes it's no harm to kind of be forced to go back to first principles and build again from the start.
So you have to record all the lectures?
Well, initially the plan had been to pre-record them.
Okay.
But the way I'm delivering now, and I think most people are, is just basically through a Zoom type situation. It's actually Teams we're using, and so just everyone goes online. But I record the lecture as well, so if people aren't available to sit in on it, they can come back and watch it. So it's kind of hits both, in terms of having it available for anyone who's not able to sit in on the lecture, but also having some interaction with the class. So then there still is interaction,
So it's live.
It's live.
It's all live.
Yeah.
And how are you finding it? How many people? So you're still criminology this year, obviously.
Yeah.
What modules do you have?
This semester now, I'm teaching criminal law to first years, policing to second years, and doing a bit on the masters as well.
Okay. That's policing modern societies. Yeah. That's the one. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, what sort of class sizes have you?
So the criminal law one is first years, and it's one they all take, so it's 75.
And how many people are logging on to the Zoom?
About 50, 55.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's icons you're looking at. No one turns on their camera. It's just you're staring into the abyss. But and a lot of them don't use the microphone, but they use the chat function to ask questions.
Okay.
Which it's not as I say. It's just a matter of adapting to a new environment.
You're in the swing of it now, are you?
Well, as I say, it's an opportunity to learn and get better for me as well.
And so you joined criminology last year, or was it
the full time last year? But I'd been the year before as well, part time.
And before that, then you did a PhD, and did you write a book during that PhD?
I wrote the book afterwards.
After the PhD on law, was it arrest and detention?
Yeah.
What's the rest of the title?
Jesus, I didn't know. They asked me on a geography.
There's something in
law
Ireland.
and practice and something. Yeah, I think it's arrest and detention law and practice.
And that was based off your PhD?
It was based on it, but I had to do a lot of additional research as well because the PhD was all about interrogation.
Okay.
So about police, so it was the law and psychology of police interrogation. And it tended to focus on just what happens from when the person is in the interrogation room.
Okay.
Whereas the book had to be more about how did they get there in the first place. So I did all about arrests and, looking for evidence as well as the law around. So it was just a law book, but
Okay.
it's about, as I say. But I kind of based it on a book that if I had been a policeman and I wanted to know about the subject, it was the book I would want to read.
Okay.
So I kind of took it from the start. Why do you arrest somebody? How can you arrest? What's the law around arrest? And take it all the way through to the various detention provisions, because there's quite a few.
And so you had this experience already clocked in because you had how many years as a guard?
Joined the Guards in 1990. So I was in the army from 1984 to 1990 and left the army at midnight the day before, sometime in February. Joined the Guards the following morning, and no downtime at all. And 1990, so left in the two, so nearly 28 years.
And what age were you then when you joined the Guards?
Jesus.
Personal questions. I'm coming in hard now at this stage.
I was, 25?
So you went into the army straight out of secondary school?
Yeah. I did. I had no choice at the time. 1984, they weren't recruiting, so I remember I applied for both of them more or less the same week.
Okay.
They weren't recruiting the Guards. The army had been my first choice anyway. They weren't recruiting the army either. So there was no jobs, and I was like that. I went in up to Collins' barracks in Cork, put my name down, and your man says you can put your name down, but there ain't no recruiting. Mightn't be for many moons. So I said, look, take it down, and just within 6 months they decided to bring in one platoon, and two guards called to my house and said report to Collins' barracks.
No way.
Yeah, 2 or 3 months after I put my name down. So
this kind of touches on what you were saying about
being
the chips falling.
life is incredibly random, and as my father says, you're better being born lucky than being born rich.
Yeah.
Although if you can be both, it'd be better.
Ideally.
But there's no doubt. Absolutely. It's just I was in Cork. I actually went up specifically for it because everyone said don't bother. I says, do it, follow through in it.
Was that your gut? Something in your gut?
It's always the same. Is follow through in it. If you have something in the back of your mind that you'd like to do, follow through in it. Try it. See what happens. Don't ever just say it won't work for me and sit back, because nothing ever will. So yeah, it's always a case of, as I say, if there's a door half open, ajar, push it a bit.
And so at 18, 19 years of age, what was it that made you want to join one or the other?
Oh, I'd always don't remember ever wanting to do anything else but the army. It was incredibly frustrating when I finished. My father wouldn't let me join the army without doing my leaving cert, and he wanted me to join the officer corps, but I didn't want to be a cadet. Partly because I wasn't. It was just, in some ways, I wanted to do the Irish Army and then go on abroad. Maybe I kind of had the thought of making sure that I was good enough more than anything else, rather than running off at 18, 19 to a foreign legion and coming back with your tail between your legs.
if you come back at all.
If you come back at all. So I did a leaving cert, and leaving cert finished in June, July, and in July I was up in Collins' barracks, and I think October.
You got the call.
I got the call. Yeah.
It's actually funny because I actually had a big interest to join a military force as well, but the father wouldn't let me join it without university.
Yeah.
So I had the same scenario, only
You only have one.
only one more step
Yes,
in the
that's
thing.
that's the, what is it? Education inflation or whatever the term is.
Whatever it is, yeah, whatever it is, it's that.
Your sons will need a master's before.
Yeah. Well, my father's thing was that if you get your legs blown off and you have no college degree and you can't get a job, I'm not funding you. That was his sort of way of saying, you're my son, I don't want you getting killed, so this is how I'm going to control you. And looking back now, it makes perfect sense, because I ended up, well, I did look at it again when I finished college, and it was the plan up until August nearly. Well, not the plan, but it was one of the contenders. But then I was just trying to juggle it. I didn't want to make a career out of it. I knew I wanted to get in. I want to get the experience, and I wanted to take that experience into some other field. And what was that other field going to be? Well, I wasn't sure. And a lot of those fields become very niche. If you've got military experience, you're going looking at maybe private security, you're going looking at special forces, maybe police forces, private investigating, etc. And again, a lot of those will be outside the country for any of the major organisations. They're not going to be based in Ireland. And the other side of those lives is that they're not very congruent with family life, or with downtime, or with actually having your own life. And these were sort of considerations that I really had to give attention to, because I never wanted to completely throw it all to the wind and just become that hardened veteran, that Jocko Willink figure.
Yeah.
And so I knew, well, then if you're not 100% dedicated to it, you can't really go for it. And so I kind of took a step back from it then. But it's interesting then that you had the same sort of divide.
I had the same, but of course at the time I was very annoyed, but of course I was eternally grateful.
Oh, I was bullying with my father.
Yeah, I know.
I was like, you don't understand.
But I was glad looking back on it now that he did, because I had no interest. Oh my God, did I hate school? I hated it. I knew I needed to have 2 honours, as it was called. You had to have 2 honours to get into the guards at the time, and I literally opened the book coming up to Easter before the leaving. Said, Jesus, I have this exam coming up in a couple of months, and actually the leaving cert was on, and the weekend in between was the first week and the second week. I went off with a buddy and another fella, and we climbed Carntool up the northeastern face, which is actually technical rock climb. So it took us 8 hours to get up the front of Carntool, and this is what I was doing the weekend in between my leaving cert. So I was not enthusiastic. I dropped out of my physics, chemistry classes because I couldn't stand the teacher, and so I had to do that subject on my own about a week before the thing kind of, Jesus, what's this? And I scraped through with 2 honours, which was just, that was...
You got them in the end.
I got 2 honours, and I was kind of...
Miracles do happen.
That was close. But I hated school with a passion. Hated it. But I got the leaving cert, and as I say, first chance I got, I hopped on a train or a bus, came to Cork.
Because where did you grow up?
Outside Killarney.
Okay. Oh, you're a Kerryman.
Oh, next to Gap of Dunlow, just
okay.
from that. So, being in the mountains was always...
So when you climbed Carrigtwohill, that would have been no ropes, no harnesses, no...
Oh, no, there would have been, for that there was. It was a
Okay.
full technical climb, so it was ropes and harness.
And did you have much... you were obviously doing that when you were growing up, were you?
Yeah. I was doing that for, I'd say, at that stage, since I was 13, 14. So
there was always that sense of adventure.
Oh yeah, but a lot of it wasn't technical climbing. It was just hill walking, or just without ropes or anything. But every weekend,
So
winter and summer.
You get into the army then, and so what was it like back then? So you would have just gone in as a regular recruit. How many years of training? Where did you go afterwards?
It breaks into 2 phases. There's phase 2 private, which is 6 months, and then another 3 months, I think, to, if after memory serves me right, to qualify as a phase 3 private, which is fully qualified. And then I tried out immediately for the Ranger Wing, which is what I'd wanted to do, and I tore my Achilles tendon about 2 days before the end of the course. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's a 4-week-long course, and at the time... one of the big things in the army at the time was running in boots. They've stopped that now because it'd be grand if they had good army boots, but running, 14, 16 miles a day in shit army boots, and they're war shit, isn't good for for any part of your body. So I came back and I was out, I'd say, a month or so recovering from that, and then went overseas to Lebanon. Came back from that and I did a few courses, heavy weapons, mortars, any course I could basically. And I tried out again for the Ranger Wing, and I practicing parachute jumping week 3 again. I tore my knee. Yeah, so I hobbled away from yet another one, and I was out about 6 months with that, and they were looking in the Ordnance Survey, the crowd that make the maps in Phoenix Park. That was actually part of the army at one stage, and there was still an army presence up there in Phoenix Park, and they were looking, because they couldn't, no part of the government were recruiting, and they were looking for anyone in the army who had leaving cert maths. And I applied and got in there and qualified as a cartographer. So that was a year-long course, and I came out of that, and I could have stayed up in the Phoenix Park. I was actually living, they had accommodation up there, and it was a nice place to live, but one reason that I came back to Cork, and I was going to try out again for the Ranger Wing, and then the guard said, "Oh look, you have an application in for the last 6 years. Are you still interested?" And I was going to say no, but my father said, "Look, your sister's big interested in the guards. Will you ever go with her?" Because for the first assessment test was sitting, whatever it was. And I said, "Sure, yeah." I says, "Well, why? Why does she need me to go with her?" Your sister. My sister was scared of the dark. I was thinking, she's going to go for the guard. So sure enough, she failed it. I got it, and I kind of said, "Okay," kind of like that. I said, "I'll see how far it goes," because there's all these steps. There's different interviews and different assessments, and it eventually came down. I did an interview, and they kind of said, "Yeah, okay." Got a notification to report for medical, and did that, passed that, and I kind of said, "Oh, I got it, will I take it?" And the army said to me, "If you stay with us, we'll pay for," because at the time I was studying civil engineering in the evenings, "we'll pay for your engineering degree and we'll put you on an officer's course." And I said, "That's tempting." And I says, "Can I have that in writing?" "Well, no, you have my word." And I kind of said, "Okay, right, goodbye," and joined the Guards.
Wow.
1990, yeah.
And then in the Guards you went in as a regular recruit?
Yeah, there's no other way to join the Guards.
And at that stage you didn't have sort of a mind map of where you wanted to go in the Guards, what divisions you wanted to be in? Because there's a different sort of Guards back then than what we see today.
There's not really.
No?
No, not at all. Same. In my class there was guys who one guy had dropped out of medicine to come into the Guards. I bet he's sorry. A couple of guys two guys were actually so they had, a lot of guys had wanted to do the Guards but couldn't because it was recruiting. I mean, when I joined 89, the Walsh program had come in, and there'd be no recruiting. Almost no, there had been a small bit, but almost no recruiting between 84, 85 and 89. And then they brought in this new 2-year training program, the Walsh program. So a completely different program. So a lot of people had got on to university, then the Guards had come up and they dropped university and come into the Guards. So then you do 6 months in Templemore, then you go out for 3 or 6 months I think, and then you come back for another 2 or 3 months, and then you go out for 9 months and come back for a month. And I loved it as soon as Templemore, to be honest with you, I think I had to go back once after that, and even that hurt me deeply, pained me greatly to have to go back into the damn place. But actually, as soon as I got out and realised that the stuff they were talking about in Templemore was completely irrelevant. They had no connection with what actually went on in the real world at all. I loved it. So, but then when we came back for our final, at that stage you weren't a guard, you didn't get sworn in for the first 2 years until you were the 9 months, I think so a year and a half. And so we were given our stations, and there was 120 of us in the 4 different classes, the group, and I was one of 2 who got outside Dublin, Tralee.
Okay.
And everyone thought, whoa, who do you know? Do you have the commissioner's phone number? Everyone else is going to Dublin and you've got Tralee. Like, I mean, that's 20 miles from my home, like. So I asked the guy from Kinmare, would he swap with me? Where was he going? He said, Clontarf in Dublin. I said, would you swap? He thought I was messing because nobody gives up a plum outside Dublin station.
Why do they want to get outside Dublin?
It's just he was from Kinmare, so he would be a guard in Tralee. So he could live at home.
But the rest of the class,
why do they want to get outside Dublin?
Yeah, why would?
Because Dublin is, first of all, expensive to live in. You get no extra money for living there. So you're basically making the same wage but having so much less in your pocket to begin with.
Okay.
Plus it's hectic. And some are happy with that and love it, but a lot of people coming into the guards are not necessarily keen to work 24/7, surprisingly. It's a job, so what? I'll do my 8 hours. If I can do it easy and do very little, that's great. And if I, otherwise, they'll always take the easy option, and you'll always have that. Like
so people were looking at you with a bit of jealousy, thinking that you had the easy option.
That I had that
cozy one, like.
I had literally the plum option because it was, as I say, it was half an hour drive from where I was living, so I would have to get no rented accommodation. Go down to Dublin. The money would be all in my back pocket. So whereas they were going to have to find digs with somebody else at the very least, and even then they'd have very little money left over.
But you said, get that way for me, get me into Dublin.
Well, the way I looked at it, no, I didn't. I kind of said, okay, I take Tralee, and I could picture myself building a bed and breakfast on the Killarney Tralee Road, settling down, and I said, I don't think so. So I said, yeah, I'll swap. Your man didn't believe me, but we swapped. He duly never left uniform. He went on the bike, I think, into Killarney eventually, and that's where he stayed all his career. Whereas I went to Dublin, got into Clontarf, a busy station. There was 14 on the unit, so 4 units at the time. And I had a sergeant that was, I'd say, he was there when the RIC were being disbanded. Like he was an ancient man. Like he used to tell us stories about having to get coal for the fire and light on the fire, and I kind of go, how old are you, like? But he was not only a gentleman, but he actually took personal interest in every single one of the lads in the unit. And he knew I was mad interested in policing. So he used to tell me, as I say, I was barely out of Templemore. On weeks and nights, he would tell me to go in plainclothes with one of the drivers, one of the older lads. So we take out a detective branch car in plainclothes, and we would just do whatever we wanted to do, which basically was just work. It was starting the unit, you'd be sitting in the back of the car, maybe if you were on the beat, they'd be dropping you somewhere or something, and for about the first half hour, they'd be talking about golf. But after that, the entire shift, it was always about work. Burglary happened here, who do we think did that? What's going on there? And it was just work. So I got into that, and as I say, the sergeant was mad promoting, pushing me to do as much. So at the time, you used to prosecute your own cases in Dublin. So I was in court nearly 4 out of 5 days every week, and it got to the point where the guys who were regular in court, because you'd come in, you'd have a charge sheet, the district court clerk would be there from 10, the judge from 10:30, arrive about 10:15, up to the clerk, it was kind of, hi Mary, how are you? She'd know your name, you put your charge sheet on it, and then the cases would be called once the judge was in, and if you were first, second or third called, it was as far down the list as you'd be, whereas the guys who were never in court, they'd be there till 1 o'clock waiting for their case to be called. So you'd be in and out of court in 15, 20 minutes, half an hour at most.
Okay.
And do that, as I say, every morning. prosecuting your own cases. So if the case actually went to trial, if somebody pleaded not guilty, you would have to prosecute it, bring in your witnesses, call your witnesses, give evidence, cross-examine their witnesses and so on.
As just a regular guard with no training in how to do any of this.
Well, that's not quite true. I was very lucky in when you're out on the 9 months, you have a training sergeant. No, actually on the 6 months, you had a training sergeant that was in Dublin, because my 6 months was in Dublin as well in Mountjoy, and he was very good. So he was a guy who had loads of operational experience. So he was a guy who gave us a lot of good knowledge. And then the rest of it, but prosecuting your own cases, I bought every law book I could, and I watched cases in court and watched how barristers did.
But you did that on your own time?
If I was in court and I'd nothing else on, I'd sit in if there was a trial. At the time, the court I was used to going was by the Bridewell, and of course that's just behind the forecourts. So if there was a decent case on, or I'd make it my business just to stick my head in and see who was, pick up the tips there from watching, and that's the best way to learn. Watch real professionals do their job.
But now then it's changed. So the DPP takes the case.
No, it was all that has never really changed from when I was a guard. The DPP. Any serious case of file has to go to the DPP, but any of the minor cases, at the time it was really the sergeant decided if you did a charge sheet or if you summons them. So any burglaries, shoplifting cases, serious assaults, those kind of cases could be dealt with by a charge sheet, and you deal it directly. Okay. But it was always the title of the charge sheet was DPP at the suit of your name versus whoever it was, and you'd give evidence. Now, if it was a more serious case, you would send the file to the DPP and he'd make a decision. But if we'll say in one of my cases, occasionally you'd have a serious assault and the judge would decline to jurisdiction. He said this is too serious for me. In which case then it'd have to go to circuit court, and then you would send the file onto the DPP and he would appoint a barrister to prosecute.
Right, okay, yes.
But or if you wanted, if you had a drunk driving case, you'd always look for the state solicitor to assist, and you might get a barrister or a solicitor to actually prosecute the case for you.
Okay.
But in any case I took the opportunity to prosecute them myself, because I enjoyed that. That was as much fun, that experience, as the actual investigating, actually standing up in court and cross-examining witnesses and examining and cross-examining. That's part of it as well. And it also helps you to understand the rules of evidence and what it is that makes a case strong, and how to link your case together. So it makes you a better investigator if you have to prosecute your own cases.
Okay. So your sergeant has said, right, you're going to go out midweek.
A week a night. So you did a week of nights every 4 weeks. So every 4 weeks, 3 out of the 4 nights, 3 out of the 4 months, he'd say, you go plain clothes and spend a week on plain clothes.
And that was you were getting paid for that, or was that overtime?
No, that was part of my regular. So instead of working uniform, I'd come in plain clothes for that week. The other 3 weeks, I'd be walking the beat or doing observer in the car, because I wasn't the driver at that stage. I was on.
Yeah, so you're still like a regular.
No, I'm still just a junior guard.
And he still had you out in plain clothes.
Yeah.
Because he was hoping for you to be able to absorb as many of the skills as you possibly could.
As far as he was concerned, I was mad enthusiastic, and it suited him. Well, it wasn't that it suited him. He knew I was interested in that, and he did the same for other guys in different things. He pushed other guys in different directions, and the result was that the loyalty to him, we would do anything for him. So there was no question of, when he gave you that fate of just dossing, the work return was phenomenal. So there was always prisoners being brought back. There was always results being brought back, because he was looking out for us, and so he was encouraging one guy to do his sergeant's exam, and he failed it, and he said, go there when you come in at nights, take the law books and get in there and spend 2 hours studying every night, so that's the kind of sergeant he was.
See, at the minute now, you need more of them in the leadership positions. because they're good at delegating the people to go where they're best suited.
But you do get those kind of people. Like, I mean, there are those kind of leaders out there. But they're few and far between.
Yeah.
And it would be great to say, yeah, they're those kind of ones. But like, I mean, I'm sure if somebody came in and audited us, there would be, you know, because like, I mean, you know, we didn't really care a whole lot for the petty offences. Like, I mean, lights on the bike and that kind of stuff, no one cared about. You know, we were all into, you know, just burglaries, drugs, you know.
But is that not where where policing is best focused? Because a lot of the petty stuff, when you prosecute, can cause a little, can irritate local communities and irritate individuals and sort of affect the image of policing in communities.
Absolutely. But you see, it's like everything. The simplest answer is to say, yeah, that would be great. And if you picture it, you can see utopia where the police only deal with the serious crime and everyone else gets a pat on the head and say. But immediately, in reality, it's grand cautioning people. And I'm all in favour of that. And most policemen, if they're given discretion, will do that. But then what happens is, when does discretion become corruption? So that is always the kind of difficulty management have, in that, you know,
how much tether do you give them? This
is it. Like, you mean, if you're putting in no fines in the spot for speeding, because everyone you stop, you let them off. You know,
that we're seeing that at the minute now. They're beginning to reel that back in, where people let off for penalty points or for fixed charge notices. It's now seen as corruption.
Well, that's what happened in Limerick. For some reason, that there's a big hoo-ha made about, you know, that fines in the spot were squared. You know, and I don't. But
there's the argument then that that's actually good policing work, potentially.
Well, look, there's no doubt about it. And if you go to any station in the country, any police station in the country, you will find a system where, if you know somebody high enough and you get stopped and you're in a position where you can put influence, that speeding ticket can be sorted out. That's corruption.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you stop somebody speeding and it's a mother with a sick child, well, that's too obvious, because that's too easy. But if you stop somebody and they're a model citizen and they're just distracted because it's been a busy day at work, and you say to them, don't do it again. I mean, that's good police work.
Yeah.
But the problem is that if you only extend that courtesy to the 25-year-old blondes, females, then that's not fair either.
Yes, corruption moving in again.
Well, is it corrupt?
On a form.
But this is the point. So it's very difficult to set hard and fast rules in policing.
Yeah.
It's certainly when it comes to the operational level. And the point being is that if you take in anybody and you let anybody get through the training system because they meet the grades, then you're going to have some kind of system in place that is so tight and restrictive that they can do nothing outside of if it's written black letter law.
Yeah.
Whereas if you bring in good people from the start and they're fully aware of ethics and they have a strong moral compass, then you don't need that tight regulatory system and you get a better police force.
Yeah.
Because, so what if you left off one or two bonds? But if you leave off, the fisherman, if you leave off, if you're generally not that pushed about getting results, if you're more interested in achieving cooperation, then cautions are the way to go.
Yeah.
And that certainly is true. And that's the way I've always worked. And the result is that you start getting information back because there is payback.
Yeah.
But the guards have gone to the point where they're destroying the sources of information because they're enforcing traffic law. And so what they're actually doing is people are being stopped. And I can never understand why a guard would give out to somebody when they stop them. That's not your job. If you stop somebody and they've done something wrong, you're going to give them a ticket and be professional about it. But But if people are being stopped and given tickets and there's no talking your way out of it,
Mm-hmm.
it's just slapped on it, then a lot of people are just going to say, fuck the guards.
Yeah.
And they're not right to do so. And this comes back to the other side, is what do the public expect? I mean, if you're going to disobey the law, you can't complain if the police intervene.
Yeah.
So, but in Ireland we have this very, I don't think it's unique to Ireland, but it's certainly very strong in Ireland, that we think the police are there to only intervene if somebody's about to murder us. Otherwise, stay the fuck away from us. None of your business. And like, I mean, you'd be I was only in, I would say I was definitely just in Clontarf, and I was doing a checkpoint, and I stopped this guy and he'd no tax, and he started laying into me, why wasn't I catching the burglars?
Ugh.
But I discovered that when I started catching the burglars, they wanted me to catch the drug dealers.
Yes.
The drug dealers wanted me to catch the murderers. The murderers wanted me to catch the paedophiles. I was never involved in catching paedophiles, so I don't know who they think is a worse problem than they
The bankers.
But everybody thinks that what they're doing isn't that bad.
Yeah.
That the police should be more focused. But the point is if they weren't doing that stuff, the police could be focused.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, the public don't know what they want either.
Yeah.
So policing is always walking a fine line between keeping the public happy, when they're as taskmasters, they tend to be quite fickle in terms of what they want, you know. They only want to see policemen when they're in trouble. Like.
Yeah.
Otherwise, never want to see them.
Yeah.
You know.
It's convenient. So then you have you're getting the extra experience then. Would you call that of detective work? That plainclothes operation. Now you're really beginning to read the street, you're beginning to learn faces, you're beginning to look what to look for, you're hearing the chatter, you're seeing how they think, how other detectives, because I assume you would have been with the detective?
No, I was with one of the senior guards in plainclothes as well, so it wasn't the detective.
Are plainclothes, okay, so plainclothes.
So no, like, you mean, in a detective is an appointed position,
okay.
So you have to go through an interview, and you're then referred to as detective Garda or detective constable. So it's an appointed position, and generally you will not be put back into uniform unless in the guards you go for promotion, you get promotion, or you make a serious boo-boo.
Yeah.
In which case, unceremoniously, you could be chucked back. But a lot of guards, uniform guards, might do work in plainclothes.
Okay.
And the guards themselves actually have a kind of what they call a buckshee system, where you might be put into a detective unit, but you're still not appointed. And you could be appointed after a year, 2 years, sometimes could be 10 years before you get appointed. But you'll be more or less a detective, but you can't call yourself a detective and you're not referred to as a detective. So, but like, uniform units might, if they have extra manpower, might say to 2 or 4 lads, especially if there's something like, we say there's some kind of incident going on where there's cars being broken into. No, it makes no sense to have a uniform car with uniform guards trying to catch that. Mm-hmm. So you'll throw a couple of lads into plainclothes for a couple of nights. It could be for just one job like that, or in some cases like ours, we put out a plainclothes car every week and night. So we had the uniform car out, we had a couple of guys in the beat, we had a bike out, and then we had a plainclothes car. So that was an extra car response, but it also meant we were following up. When we go to calls, we were able to follow up to get statements, canvas witnesses, whatever. So you were getting
best of both worlds, kind of.
Yeah, the best of both worlds in many ways. So it was a great experience.
And as a uniform guard, if you had a particular case or person that you wanted to be in plainclothes for, would you have to seek permission first? But like, can I come in plainclothes for these nights?
Oh, no, like, you
can't just pick
and choose. No.
Yeah,
it's up to the sergeant to, like, he expects you to be in a uniform, and then you turn up, like, it's only he decides that if he's enough manpower for everything else and he can spare some, and some sergeants never did. Like, as I say, in Clontarf Station, our unit was unusual. The other units never put out a plainclothes car.
Okay.
So that's very much the call that sergeant was making.
And how long, like, potentially people can spend the whole careers as a uniform guard, could they?
Yeah, quite a few do.
Okay. And due to lack of motivation or lack
Not
of...
necessarily, no. Like, I mean, that wouldn't be fair either. Some guys love... There's advantages to it. First of all, when you finish your shift, you're finished.
Okay.
Whereas when you're in detective branch, it's not that you... Sometimes you do take work home with you, but you're always thinking about it. There's always that thinking element, you know, because if you're working a case, you're always trying to figure out, you know, what are you missing, what else can be found.
Well, it's time sensitive as well.
A lot can be. So, like, I mean, certainly the first, you know, 48 hours are important because witnesses start to fade away and their memories and so on. But when you're in uniform, you can kind of, you clock off, you go home.
Okay.
That's it. I'm done.
It's more of an office job.
It is.
Structure.
But as well as that, like, I mean, there's the constant variety. There's, you know, some people, especially some people, like the interaction with the public.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, my career meant that I was going further and further, you know, away from not just the public, but from regular guards. You know, I was kind of gone completely. So I wasn't mixing neither with public or with regular guards. And so that can be lonely enough in itself. Whereas being a uniformed policeman means you know, they will get to know everybody.
Yeah, you're part of the team. Like.
But it's not just in the station, you get to know the community too. So, like, I mean, it's you definitely know where the best fish shop is. You know where the best, you know, everything. You know where to find everything.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a lot of guys enjoy that part of it.
So how long did you spend as a uniform?
So at 90 I joined the Guards, then I came to Cork in 93. I was still uniform.
Did you apply for Cork?
I did, yeah.
And now, is it hard to move around the country?
Incredibly hard.
Yeah.
Incredibly.
So you have to
hard.
wait for a position to open?
You have to, basically what it is that if they're willing to release you.
Okay.
And that is almost impossible. But I was just incredibly lucky. Well, I was just after getting married and we were expecting a child. So she was living in Cork and kind of played the sob card. And again, there was just a group coming out of Templemore, so they were able to slot me. But again, fellas had been 15, 20 years trying to get out of Dublin at that stage and they still couldn't get out. So it's still, there's no formal process for it. It's a hit and miss thing.
Because that's someone told me the other day was that because they were talking about going to the Guards and they some of the topics we discussed here about being moved around and not having control over. He was like, well, I have a house bought and paid for here and my wife is living here, and he said that he was told that under those conditions he could apply to be stationed in Cork and would probably get it.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of truth to that.
Yeah.
And then so structure, that was the anchor of an area allowed him to sort of get it. But outside of that prerogative, you're at the will
of HR department, like, which are pretty much, you know,
if you're biting at the bit to get into Dublin though.
Or if you're biting at the bit to get into Dublin,
you'll get into Dublin.
They'll suck you in.
Yeah. So like if you wanted to get a win and aim straight for the thick of it, you probably would get that.
Oh yeah, you'd get Dublin. They don't know what station you'd get in Dublin because...
Well, anywhere in Dublin,
you'd be surprised. The DMR is, there's some very different stations. Like there's some crazy busy. There's some then that are kind of... I mean, if you got Pierce Street, for example, you'd be standing on the Dáil for the rest of your days. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh. That's worse than static security. Yeah. Well, it is static security. It's glorified static security.
Absolutely. So if you got, you know, a station with posts attached, that's where, as the junior member, you'll spend a lot of time there. Oh. Yeah. That's
so if you wanted to get into Dublin, you can't pick your station.
Oh, like, you mean
you're really
you'd want to be royalty to get that, you know.
So you come down to Cork. You're in there for 3 years. You're still uniform.
Yeah.
What are you doing then? How many?
Actually, I come into a unit in Cork then, and I'm there for about a year. And
when you say unit, is that a particular division, or is that just a term given for a group of guards?
That's so the uniform, we'll say, frontline responders are divided into units. So at the time it was A, B, C, and D. Okay. So Unit A is just they all work together. Unit B comes on. So it's a shift system. So there was one unit resting and 3 would be working. 1 would be on nights and 2 would be covering the day shift.
Okay.
Now there's 5 units at the minute, but so I came to a unit in Cork and I was there about a year, and then I was brought into the crime task force.
And how did you get in there?
Because when I came down to Cork, I was still taking the kind of way I worked from Dublin, and that was considered a little unusual when I came to Cork.
They liked that, did they?
That's hard to know if it was universally liked or not. I don't think so. But let's just put it this way, that I thought when you went out in a patrol car you worked. That wasn't necessarily
the common practice.
The common practice. So I think someone said that they'd never actually come across a uniformed guard who'd solved the burglary and got property back before. Which I was kind of... And I remember asking one of the lads in the unit, who do I go to get a search warrant here? And I remember being told, never heard of a uniformed guard getting a search warrant. And I kind of, that's unusual. So, I mean, that's that again. That was this particular unit. It doesn't mean that all the units were the same. But
was it difficult for you, though, to try and bring that extra level of work ethic if you're around people who are like, oh, Kevin, man, give it a rest. Like, leave that to that department. Like, did they kind of resent you on a certain level because you were shining them up to look bad?
I think that would be a fair assessment. Some.
But you stood out, though, for your superiors and for whoever was setting up that task force.
It was set up at the time, and I was asked, would I give it a shot? I gave it a shot. I got on well there. It was a unit that they actually had work returns, so you had to have a certain work return every month, a number of arrests, a number of drug detections, and I think there was one other metric, and that was put up in a bar chart every month in the office. So a lot of lads were not necessarily keen about going in there. But
so that those metrics weren't in the uniform.
Oh no,
that was for this task.
That was just for this task force.
Okay.
And so it was a unit of 4, so there was 2 cars out at the time, so there was 4 units of 4, so 16 plus a sergeant, and there was one guy in the office. And so there was 4 of us on our unit, and myself and my partner and the other car, and we for 2 years just worked, you know.
So you didn't have a particular avenue you were meant to focus on? It was like,
no, it was because it was a
forefront of crime stopping here.
Well, it was called the Crime Task Force. So basically, we were rapid responders to anything that was happening anywhere. Okay. And in some cases, superintendents might ask for us. For example, on the north side, they might ask us for us in Grana because they had a particular problem with joyriding, or somewhere else they might have a particular problem with drugs or something else. So we'd be assigned to the area for X amount of time. But generally, we could go anywhere in the city, whereas if you're in the district, you're supposed to stay. Now, there's exceptions to that, but otherwise you're supposed to stay within your district all the time.
But you're still uniformed. On paper, you're still uniformed.
It's a plainclothes role. So we have unmarked cars, and then it's plainclothes role. And then after that, I was asked to go into what's sometimes called special branch, crime special. And that was... dealing with investigating terrorism. Okay. So I went in there in 96, and
did you apply for that, or again they came to you?
No, they came to me, and myself and my partner actually were asked would we go in there, and we did. So we were split up, and we split up a senior partnership. So each of those took me. So a guy called John Buckley took me, and Charlie went with another fella, and so they trained us in to, you know, because it was a completely different type of policing, because, you know, it wasn't about street crime, it wasn't about burglars, it wasn't about drug dealers. These were people that by and large kept themselves, you know, low key, and so it was a very different type of policing. So I got in there, and so that was basic, generally inquiries was what it started with, and as it over time started building up information, started, you know, profiling. That would be a big thing. The other thing we do would be handling any requests that would come from the British security forces, the American security forces, anything that had to do with our Cork area as such. We'd be asked to investigate on their behalf. Interpol, they'd all come to us, so we'd be dealing with that kind of stuff.
And how many of you were in this now?
At that stage, I'd say there was about I'd say about 16
Okay.
in that unit.
And again, you're on that sort of 4 teams, 4 units.
Oh no,
on a shift basis?
this I'd say we kind of worked in our. It was just myself and my partner on one unit, so we were just 2. So there was part of the unit used to look after escorts.
Mm-hmm.
So we were on the inquiry side. So it was just at times it was just, but we wouldn't have to answer calls as such.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have to. We weren't on the command and control system. They knew we were there and they could call for us, but we wouldn't be assigned calls unless they were specific to us. But we could take calls, so we could, if we were passing somewhere and there was something, we'd say, control, we'll take that. But generally, we wouldn't be assigned a burglary or anything else. So we were left alone. So it was basically do our own thing, follow up on that. You know?
When you say escorts, what sort of escorts are we talking about?
They would have done post office escorts, so there'd be a police escort assigned to post office money deliveries and stuff.
And Special Branch handled that because of the IRA tendency of robbing those places.
So like you mean the army would be doing the big bank transfers, but the smaller ones it would be Special Branch would handle that.
Okay.
So Jerry McCabe, for example, when he was shot in Limerick, that's what he was doing.
He was Special Branch.
Well, like I mean, it doesn't have to be if there's no one from Special Branch around. It could be anyone from any of the drug unit might actually be, but usually is
specialised.
Well, it's just one of the roles that now I'd say since they brought in now, of course, the rapid, the armed response units that they may well do some of that. I don't know.
And so you're beginning to build up information on certain people within a certain area. Is there the risk then? So that would have been during the 90s.
Well, yeah, that would be late.
How tumultuous?
Well,
You
had the ceasefire in 94, so kind of they thought it was all closing down. But then the new IRA, the continuity and all the rest of it, and then you had various instances up in Northern Ireland and so on with the 32 county and the new IRA, or the real IRA at the time, sorry. They changed names so often, the real IRA at the time. And so starting in 90, and of course was just in there, I'd say I joined there in about April, and Jerry McCabe was killed in June, I think. So I was just in there when that happened. So I mean, from the get-go again, it was busy, And
what was your average shift looking like? Was it tense? Was it?
No, because it's inquiry, it's low key. A lot of it is done in offices, going through files.
Was it boring?
Not at all, because you're constantly looking for, who's who, where's this coming from. So it's less action, but it's still intense.
Yeah, and engaging work.
Oh yeah.
Because the IRA got pretty big into the drugs as well, but was that down in Cork as well?
Well, when you say got big into the drugs,
one of the branches of the IRA began to sort of spiral into that kind of drug dealing, funding the. What
a lot of it was they were getting protection money from the dealers.
Yeah.
So there was quite a bit of that going on.
Yeah, so that was that sort of work was still happening around, and gun running.
Yeah.
Still all that.
Yeah.
And so, how long did you spend?
So they did that until 2002 when I was still in it. So then they set up a specialist covert intelligence unit, and they asked me to go into that.
And they set that up because things were escalating?
Well, at the time you had the real IRA were becoming quite a serious threat. There was other Islamic terrorism was becoming a serious threat even in this country. There was stuff happening in that. So so there was sufficient grounds to set up a dedicated covert unit for it.
And they came to you again and said, have you any interest in this? Now, are they asking you, or are they saying, we need you here?
They don't say they need me, or they're asking me. They're more basically saying, Monday, this is where you'll be. Yeah.
And how many were in that unit?
I can't tell you that.
Okay. Yeah, that was a smaller one again. And so in this, you're married in all this. You obviously can't breathe a word of this to herself. I imagine there was a fair amount of stress going along with it, particularly in the more covert unit. How did that affect the relationship?
Does that help? No, it doesn't.
No.
It's not good.
Because there's quite a high divorce rate within the
Yeah.
guards.
Yeah, like I mean, it's not only you're dealing with stress and trauma, and you have, as you say, you generally don't talk about what you're doing, like, which isn't healthy. It's not healthy for you as an individual, and it's certainly not healthy for relationships. Like I mean, looking back on it, I'd be off duty and I'd get a phone call to meet somebody, and I'd
you
be
have to
gone.
go.
And I'd be gone, or when
No
I
explanation, just
no,
I gotta go.
like you mean, as my kids said, when the hell is he buying the dog? Because I'd be saying, I'm going to see a man about a dog. When are we ever going to see this dog? Why is he so fussy about the dog? So, but like you mean, and in that covert unit, you could get a phone call, and it was just a case of scramble, like, and you could be gone in some cases for a week, like, just gone.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's tough.
It's not family friendly, that's for sure.
And how many kids did you have at that stage?
I'd said 4 at that stage.
How do you juggle it? Like?
Something always falls down, like,
Yeah. And so how long did you spend in that unit?
Until 2010.
Whoa.
Now, that was an adrenaline rush. That was...
Whoa.
Yeah.
And were you addicted to it at that stage?
Yeah.
The decision was made then, and it was hell for leather for it.
All like, I mean, once in it, and like, I mean, it was an absolutely top class unit, and the person leading it was a female sergeant, and she was
Wow.
one of the best operators I've ever worked with. Like. And the guy heading it up, the superintendent, was a class act. So it was high end. It was the high end stuff, like.
The pinnacle of what you could
Oh,
really
like
do
I
with it.
mean, you could not anywhere in the country, because we worked with the lads from Dublin, and we were as good, and it was that good, like, and we were as well trained.
And how much of a risk to your daily life was it?
Well, let's put it this way: up to joining that unit, I had life insurance, but after a week in that unit, I went and got more life insurance. Because, like, I mean, there was no doubt, and it wasn't necessarily a shootout. It wasn't necessarily, it was driving. It was like, I mean, you were driving like you had blue lights and a siren, but you had neither.
Okay.
So you were driving unmarked cars at, like, you had
Speed,
speed. Yeah.
And why no lights? Because it was that covert. There was no lights.
You're not covert if you have lights inside.
And
it blows the cover.
These would have been different unmarked cars from what we see today, obviously. They would have been completely unique. And were they modified in any way?
Yeah, I used to have a cushion for my back. And yeah, because the seats were shit, that's for sure.
So sometimes any car that can fly past you and you think, geez, he's a young, crazy driver, they're on the slimmest of chances.
I remember one guy who came up and he was obviously pissed, and we were going to a job and one car was in front of me and I was behind, and we'd obviously, when I say undercut, it was better than undertaking, and this guy stormed up, obviously in fit of road rage. And
how did he catch up with you?
Because we had stopped at lights and we couldn't get through the junction because the red light, and he pulled open the door, and I had a radio in my hand and I had a firearm on the, I think, beside me somewhere, and he was going, I said, fuck off. I closed the door, and the lights hadn't changed, but the gap had come, and we shot off. And I'd say he didn't know what, but he just whatever it was, he didn't want to know.
Nothing to do.
Whatever he thought he was going to say suddenly went out of his head, But yeah, it can happen. But like, look, it's just that kind of driving is just incredibly stressful, because you're trying to pivot your head 360 degrees,
constantly.
Like, and like, I mean,
Jesus. You're sweating, your adrenaline's pumping.
Absolutely. And like, I mean, it's you feel you have control because you know, like, you think you know how far you can push it, you can
but it's
push
the public can do such.
Oh, well, it's a public, but I remember coming up in a country road, and I was coming up to a T junction, I was bombing it, But I knew I was going to stop.
Yeah.
Because I had to yield right away. So I slammed on the brakes and I was coming to a stop. But the car that was coming across with the right of way didn't know I was going to stop. So they panicked and they tried to stop. But of course they had the hope of trying to stop because they were bombing it as well. So and there was someone in the car with me, we've stopped and we're looking, turned our heads left and we see this car and it's flaking in or out, all across the road like, because this guy had lost control almost of the car like. I hadn't touched him. I was nowhere near touching him, but he panicked. Yeah. You know, now to be honest, it was hard to blame him because if I was in his eyes, I would probably have done this. But trying to brake was the worst thing possible. Like, I mean, he should have tried to drive it, but look.
But this is something I always say to anyone who listens to me. If you're going to go for it, go for it. It's when you hesitate, accidents happen.
Absolutely. Like, I mean,
and that's the same in life, even for projects and anything you have. If you just want to go for it, you have to.
Like, I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, and like a lot of guys, a lot of young fellas think they can control the car, they can drive at speed. It's not driving in a straight line at speed that makes a good driver. It's reading those situations and making the right decision. You know, applying the brakes or putting the accelerator down. You know, a lot of people panic, they go for the brakes, you lose control. Whereas if you put the accelerator down, you know, you retain control, you can drive your way out of it. But that's easy to say, and to be honest with you, I've had more accidents. I remember after one accident I went in to see the consultant. It was actually the accident that damaged my neck, and he says, all right, he says, is this your first accident? No, I said, it's about my 12th, you know.
All through those 8 years?
No, it was before that as well. But I think most of them were fender benders. But you know, but still, like, you're constantly tipping the car. Like, you know, you know, the amount of mirrors I've blown out cars. Like, you know.
So, how much training do you get for that level of driving experience? Because there's obviously a certain amount of training you get anyway.
There should be. But like, I mean, in the guards, like, I mean, they have started introducing advanced driving courses. But
so back then there wasn't.
Like, I mean,
you had to learn on the job.
Yeah. So that was the crime task force was great.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I mean, that's a huge problem. Like, I mean, the British police are much more professional in terms of the training. Whereas as the guards, like, I mean, in terms of interrogation training, it's a lot of it is kind of you pick it up as you go along. That's not good practice because you can pick up a lot of stuff and not necessarily the good stuff. Yeah. You know, so like, I mean, you can take private courses, you know, and that's one way around it. But like, I mean, it's just driving at that kind of speed and constantly second guessing what everyone else is doing is it does not help your stomach. Like, you know, all the time it kind of does.
You don't get used to it?
No, you never do. And I think, to be honest with you, you know, if you ever get complacent about it, is you're gonna be, you know, you are always aware that you're a high risk situation. Like, geez, like the thoughts of you know, inside in towns, like members of the public, you know, if you run over somebody, like, I mean, not only would you never forgive yourself, and you know, and you'd be in trouble, but like, I mean, it's just why would you? And
so even if you don't hit people, you're kind of replaying it in mind. Jesus.
Like, I mean, the amount of near misses, like, always, like, you know.
So 2010, what happens then?
So I get promoted then to sergeant. So
you're back in uniform then again.
You have to go back to uniform.
For how long?
You hope it's a year, but you never know.
Wow.
Like, I mean, it used to be a regular thing that there was a promotion list every year, but in 2008, 2009, big problems with money in the country, no promotions, this kind of. So I didn't know how long I was going to be going out for. So I was out in promoted sergeant, sent to Dungarvan, and I was 3 months out when I was driving Miss Daisy. So funny, like, I was, if I was going any slower and taking in the scene, I was literally taking in, oh, this is nice. And next thing, guy T-bars me, and I'm carted off to hospital. And I'm still carrying the neck injury from that. Like,
that's the one you went to the consultant after.
Yeah. So
member of the public.
Oh yeah, member of the public.
Just
knew. There was he was there was a junction the other side of the road. It was a bad corner anyway, and he just didn't look and cut across.
Oh.
He got some fright when he realised that it was a Garda car and there was a sergeant in uniform that came out.
So what happened there? What was the injuries?
Damaged my neck.
And was that your career over then? It was the beginning of it, was it?
Well, you see, when I went, basically the guard said you can't drive anymore, you can't get involved in violent confrontation, and you can't handle firearms until you're better. So I kind of said, okay, might take a year or two, but I'll get better, you know. But then in 2014, I was involved in arresting a fella, and it injured my neck even further. And so that kind of, there was, at that stage, it was unlikely I was ever going to get back to full health.
So you were signed off to go back to full active duty?
No, I wasn't.
So you shouldn't have been involved in that arrest?
No, you see, you sound like a
defence
barrister for the guard. Technically, no, I shouldn't have, but when I asked the Garda surgeon who was certifying me, does that mean I'm on office duty and I shouldn't go out? No, you can go out. So I said, how am I supposed to avoid getting into kind of like, how can you go to the uniform guard and say, no, I'm sorry, I can't get involved. I don't want to dirty my hands. And
you can go swim and just don't get wet.
Yeah. So he said, he waved, well, you know what you shouldn't do now. So guess what? When I met him again after the assault, yes, we had words. We had a chat. But there you go, you know. So I was completely and utterly at that stage. There was little chance of ever getting back. Full recovery at that point anyway.
So you began to look at other options?
Well, no, I was already studying, because from the first accident I started doing the masters because I was just bored at home, and I was kind of saying, Jesus. So I did the masters in criminology.
Okay.
And
did you have a college course though?
No, I didn't. Because Templemore, you see, had between I going there and at this point was now considered a degree.
Mm-hmm.
That was one thing. I was studying maths through Open University for a number of years, so I had some qualifications from that. Not a degree, but I was working towards it. So I didn't think I'd get in, but I phoned the head of the course, the coordinator at the time, and I said, look, you know, and I says, have you any interest? I said, I'd be interested in just sitting in. And he says, look, he says, leave it with me. He says, what service is it? 20? He says, I think, he says, that counts as you know, nice experience. So I was invited to come in. So I said,
and that was criminology in UCC?
Master's criminology.
And that would have been with, what's the name of it? Kieran
McCullough?
Oh, no. I'm thinking of the older gentleman who left us.
Colin Summers. No. This was before him.
I thought he set up criminology.
No, not at all.
No, okay.
Kieran McCullough had actually just set it up, and he wanted, as he said to me at the time, he wanted somebody with policing experience to come on. So again, it was just pure luck, because I wouldn't get on it now because there's so much interest in it to get on the course. So I got on it. I think it was the first year of it. So I got on, and I met one of the law lecturers, was Professor Shane Kilcummins, and we got on very well. And at the end of the course, he supervised my master's, or the thesis, and he said to me, would you be interested in pursuing the PhD? And I said, you know, interested, can't afford, but he said, look, let's do some work on it, let's start some work. And that was in 2011-12. And then he moved to Limerick as Professor of Law down there. So I moved down there and finished my PhD in 2016.
PhD took how many years?
Well, I mean 4, I suppose, because I was tipping around from 2012, but officially in Limerick it was from 2014 to 2016. So it was.
And it would have been PhD in criminal justice in
Limerick?
In
law.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was, as I say, it was the law interrogation, like, but I did.
And so then you got your PhD, and then you joined UCC.
So then, I'd left the Guards. I retired from the Guards in 2017, and I was doing a few bits and pieces, and somebody actually asked Shane Kilcummins, did I know anyone who'd give a lecture on policing to the UCC students, and my name was put forward, and I was asked to come in, and then they said, look, will you do the criminal law part as well? So I did that part-time, just delivering those, and then the following year I was asked would I come on board full-time.
Full-time.
Yeah, vacancy had come up, somebody, they were short, so
Again, chips falling in your favour.
see, we can't beat luck, like.
So you come on then, UCC, you take a couple of modules, you're tipping away. Do you enjoy this? Are you constantly dealing with the fact that you're no longer...
No.
You were happy to leave it behind you when you did? Had you gotten had you gotten to the end of your tether with the guards by the time you left?
Well, I mean, certainly it was a bit frustrating the guards had changed considerably, and I have to say I had been out of uniform for 16 years or something, and then I went back as a sergeant, and it was like
different world, was it?
It was like a horror show. It was kind of what the fuck happened here, you know? I mean, there was little morale, there was little cohesion in the units, there was little interest in work. Everyone was concerned about putting in their numbers. And fellas were running around literally, just doing things without actually doing it. You know, it was, so they were out in patrol cars, they were driving around and they were not seeing anything. And there was one case where, I was actually going out and I was just getting so frustrated because there was one case that turned out to be a really big case and I could get nobody to investigate it. And that was
so you were asking, I need someone to take this case.
This was a traveller gang who were targeting elderly people with the driveway scams. So they'd come into an elderly person's house, they'd start tarmacking the driveway, and then they'd ask for outrageous figures, 7,000-8,000 euro.
Yeah.
So one guy made a complaint, and I went up and, I told him not to pay. And I said, look, we'll handle it, do not. He eventually paid. Behind my back, you know.
Out of fear?
Out of fear, of course it was out of fear. He was an elderly man, he wasn't going to. And I was able to keep them away from him for so long. I couldn't stay there 24/7. And anyway, but so I came back and I said, they must have done more. So I went around to everyone, all the units in the station, anyone know? No, nothing. And then I was going through the computer and I saw an incident, a civil dispute out in another house, and I went out there. They targeted it now, but their mistake here was that it was a long driveway, a new house, but the guy was far tougher than they were. So now he refused to pay, but they were threatening him and they were threatening the family, and eventually they gave him a check and they went into the bank and cashed it. But he was willing to make a statement. And a lot of elderly people are not willing to make statements. So I took a statement and I started following up on who this group were. And I eventually identified about 18 or 20 of these acting as 2 to 3 different gangs. They'd be in Ireland for 3 months and then they'd be in Europe, or in some cases Australia or South America. They would go and pull these scams there.
What?
Oh yeah. And
Irish travellers.
But then one of the things that I said, there's more to this than just tarmac.
Yeah.
And sure enough, there was rhino horn went missing around the place. And I says, it makes sense. The bread and butter is these kind of scams, but they're sussing places out at the same time. So I did a bit of digging and I started, and we found a Georgian dresser that had been stolen in Donegal, stored in a storage unit just outside the airport in Dublin, worth 40 grand.
What?
Yeah. They'd sold it to a dealer, an art dealer in the UK. He paid him, was it £6,000 or £8,000, based on a photograph they'd sent him from the back of a van. So they literally had stolen it from the house. This guy in a shirt and tie and a suit called up to an old lady's house, a fine house you can imagine with a Georgian dresser, knocked and said, I'm here from the museum. Sorry. I'm here from the museum. Did you not get? We're doing a collection of fine art pieces. Like, they obviously knew she had the piece. Like, and did you not get the phone call? No. But like, would you be willing to? Oh, okay. And of course, old lady delighted to get her piece displayed in the museum, and so your man loaded on the van, drove, I'd say, a mile down the road, opened the back, took a photograph, sent it across to England. The dealer was waiting, but oh yeah, that looks perfect. Here's the down payment. Then he never got it. So so it was sitting in the storage unit outside. So we got that back, and so. But the point was that the original how that started was the guard who went to that call said, "Oh, this is not a Garda matter. This is not a criminal matter. This is a dispute between the contractor and the person. They don't want to pay for the quality of the work." So it wasn't a civil dispute. So that kind of take the easy path all the time. But that wasn't the only thing. I mean, it was just I think my interpretation of what had happened to guards at that point was that someone decided that not everyone's pulling their weight. And when organizations decide not everybody's pulling their weight, the plan is to bring the standard of everybody up to the highest standard. But that's not what happens. Instead, they drag down the higher performers down to so it's the lowest common denominator is what they get. And was what I saw. Guys just had little interest in getting involved. There was a few guys who loved it still, but my experience is that if you can get a few guys who are interested in work, use them, give them opportunities. Guys who aren't, let them do the run-of-the-mill stuff. But if it's like if you have a racehorse. If you put a milk cart on it and that's what you got it doing, your racehorse isn't going to be much after that. And that was the way I looked at it. But look, management had a different view on it, and and that's what's happened is the guards have gone where the British police went and realised what a mess they were making by looking for efficiencies, cost savings. That's
how do you change that?
Oh, that is the subject of a 3-year degree. Yeah, I don't know. That's not going to change because the people who are influencing the managers and the guards are those who are training managers in industry, where widgets are being made. And if you have identifiable inputs, you know how you'll get how many outputs you'll get. Yeah. But when you're dealing with a social service like the police, I mean, and I was even making this point in class the other day, is that community policing is incredibly inefficient because it involves literally guys walking the beat and talking the talk.
You can't write up numbers.
You can't write up numbers. You don't want them writing up numbers. You want them interacting. It's inefficient, but yet is a very effective policing. And it goes back to what I was saying, is at the end of the day, if people trust the police, they're going to help them more. And there's going to be less need for the police. But by just putting the police about numbers, you're just going to... Police can always deliver on numbers, but it means stopping a lot of people and issuing a lot of fines in the spot.
Yeah. And as you said, they made the unimportant measurable rather than the measurable important.
Yeah.
Or is it the other way around? I think I said it around.
Yeah, but that's absolutely. So that's not going to change. I thought Drew Harris would make big changes, and he was certainly well placed, and he's certainly competent to do so, and he has the ability to do so. I don't know if he has, and
he could be getting bogged down with
there is being parachuted in the top of this organisation is not going to be the easy route for anyone to make change. But what happened in Limerick there, the guys being suspended for corruption that amounts to squaring a few traffic tickets, you're kind of saying, is that the serious level of corruption if that's what's all troubling the guards? We're getting all fairly light, but
there was also the guards that were tipping off the gangs in Limerick for the...
Well, there you go, Tim. That's what the reports said, the media reports. I don't know, because I've deliberately avoided getting to know the details of the story, but I will say this, that if that was the case, then I would imagine there would have been a big hoo-ha about a court case and criminal charges. At this point, there hasn't been. But in the same place, a number of guards have been suspended for traffic squaring tickets. You kind of say, I think they were going for the big prize, and I think they're taking the consolation prize here, would be my take. And I could be wrong. I could be misreading the situation. But I would think that some of the stuff that was fed to the press might have been a bit like Donald Trump's Rudy Giuliani stuff, It mightn't be quite that much involved when push comes to shove. I don't know.
do you still keep a finger on the pulse, pun intended?
No.
And is that actively avoiding it?
When you're out, you're out. You know, and
there's no point keeping a toe in it.
Well, like, you mean, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, you mean, when I left the army, I still have a few buddies that I still talk to. But you move on, and either you stay sitting on the fence looking in as a retired, you know, turning up to the station on a regular bit. You give over, like, you know. You know, I've moved on. I enjoy teaching. I actually enjoy it more than I thought, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually do, you know. I always kind of thought might be interesting to try my hand at teaching at some point, you know, kind of a vague notion.
Yeah.
But what I enjoy about it is that I'm learning more back from the students in that they're forcing me to think.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, like, I mean, you used to ask a lot of questions, and no, but I mean, you used and other students do too, and you give an answer. But I've always been somebody who reflects back on what you've done. Could you do it better? Or thinking about what you said. Is there a better answer? You know, and as I say, even yesterday we were talking about policing, and we're just talking about community policing being inefficient, and how does that work in an organisation where efficiencies matter? And that's the point, it doesn't. So what do you do? Like, I mean, do you say, you know, we want inefficiencies and accept that policemen should not have targets to meet? But then, you know, someone has to report somewhere. And, like, I mean, the guards, as they say, like, I mean, the guards could deliver 1.5 million breathalyzer tests from nowhere, like.
Yeah.
But I mean,
but that's what happens when you put the pressure on those things.
But you see, this is the point: is that they became a metric that guards had to meet. But at the end of the day, there was no consideration given how practical that was. So, like, I mean, it was just more work piled on top of them, and then that's what's become. I notice is a 10-hour shift now. The guards, as well as answering the calls that come in on a regular basis, it could be quiet, it could be, you know, busy, doesn't matter. But if any cases they pull up, they have to investigate as well.
Yeah.
So that means they're constantly looking for time to take statements. They're constantly looking to fit in time to do their files.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, when I came to Cork first, I mean, typed files were unheard of. It was all what they call crease, a half sheet, handwritten files. You know, which meant they were few and far between.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of work involved.
Yeah.
Whereas suddenly, and if they wanted a typed file, there was a typist you gave your work to. But suddenly laptops came in, and every super high-tech guard was slapping out his own. And what becomes of it is that it becomes the norm. It becomes expected, and everything suddenly develops into, you know, a DPP-sized file for the most minute, silly things. So guards spend so much time and all the people who were hired as typists, all the civil servants that were hired as typists, they all claim they can't type. And what they end up doing is working in offices where they generate requests for paper. So they actually are just part of the whole let's push paper around circus. So at the end of the day, it's the uniformed guard who's busy trying to solve crime out in the street, answering calls, who comes back after a day or two off, opens his locker, and this avalanche of paper comes down. Where's this report? Where's that? Why is this not in? And so he's going to spend the first shift just answering those. Not that there's no, you know, where it is, I will have this. It's just literally answering the volume of paperwork that comes down.
Has lost the culture of suing? Has that also increased the requirement for paperwork? Because now every second of a guard's life almost needs to be documented. And, well, what did you do that caused this to happen? And the blame is kind of flipping a small bit.
Like, I mean, that has always been the case, is that, like, I mean, the guards, if a complaint is made against the guard, you are in a position that you're going to have to prove that you're innocent.
And that's adding to the paperwork, though, because you need to be able to write down every interaction you had.
Like, you mean, you're supposed to be recording, your notebook's supposed to have all this, but I mean, what it means is that for a lot of guards, you know, you have that constant threat of complaints being made against you. You've constant threats of somebody assaulting you. So you go to arrest somebody, you have to be willing to fight.
That was actually a thing I wanted to bring up with you was, and I know we're time sensitive now, is part of the training thing the guards are seriously lacking is physical hand-to-hand quality training.
They don't want it.
I know, but if we could get guards
no, they don't want
with
it.
jiu-jitsu experience,
No, they don't want it.
It's just baffling. You see videos of 2 or 3 guards trying to restrain one fella.
Look, it is incredibly frustrating, and it's dangerous for the guards involved. But look at it this way. There used to be a height restriction for the guards. So they wanted tall guards. And if you were seriously tall guard, they put you on a post.
Yeah.
You know? Because you looked well. They sent you to Dublin. But then they got away with the height restriction.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted more girls in the job. So what did they have to do? They had to introduce pepper spray. Because no matter how... I remember one of the guys I shared a room with in Templemore was 6'6". He was built like a brick shit house. He couldn't run for peanuts. He couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. But as he says, he'd get off the motorbike and guys would just look at him and just run.
Yeah.
Whereas everyone I went to arrest, they thought they had a chance.
Yeah.
Because, I was just an average guy.
Yeah.
Let's try it,
But that's why if we could get guards with good quality...
But here's the thing, is that the amount of guys... Once you go into physical confrontation, it's very difficult for the blood not to flow.
But that's why if you have them trained properly...
No. Even well trained, there is just... It's situations that happen so quickly, and if you're that well trained, and you are, you end up... just let's put it this way, that guys tended to bleed a lot when I went to arrest them. And it wasn't my intention to get them. But Jesus, they hit their heads, off this, that, or they hit them off the doors or the side of the car or whatever. And kind of go, oh, geez, not another blood, And
Yeah.
I bring, I didn't do a thing. And you kind of go, and you kind of feel, they think I'm hammering the heads off them outside. It was just, I kind of went, geez, this got to stop. And the other thing is when members of the public see guards being violent.
That's you're backing up my point here.
No. Wait till I make the point. Especially if they see the baton involved. What generally tends to happen, as you got to understand, is that people are paying no attention to what's going on until suddenly it's the guard
being violent,
yeah. And then the video cameras are out, and what you have now is the situation that he's getting the head beaten off him. The guard is being violent. No one remembers or knows what happened beforehand.
With jiu-jitsu though, you've no striking, you've no kicking.
No, but you see,
it's a grappling thing.
It is a grappling thing that works grand if you were on one-on-one.
Yeah.
But that's not the real life situation because, a lot of times guys aren't on their own. Guys who are on their own and you come up to them, you want to arrest them, generally go quietly.
Yeah.
It's the guy who thinks he has support.
So you can't get caught on the ground when he's got 3 or 4 buddies ready.
This is it. So if you're dealing with 3 or 4 guys and you're on your own, you're going to have to up the ante. And that's the problem. So pepper spray doesn't solve all the problems. It doesn't. But it's the only thing that they could offer that does. Tasers would be a great idea. But again, you're looking at tasers being taken off guards, but that's a different story. Yeah. But the problem is guards don't want, management don't want lawsuits coming in.
Yeah.
And no matter how good you are, as I say, when you're in a situation, and the greatest difficulty I had once I got injured, the greatest fear I had was that I would overreact. Some 16-year-old would take a swipe and I would overreact and put him down hard. It's graduating the amount of violence to respond, to be proportionate to the amount of violence you're getting, and just to give enough to put him down. But the real life isn't neat and tidy like, because you're dealing with 3 or 4 fellas. You can be gentle with one, but that's taking up time, and some other guys coming on your back, and once you go down, you're not getting back up again. And you're always factoring in those things, and sometimes you're going to make sure he stays down.
Yeah.
And it's it's a messy situation. And I noticed that in Dublin, guys would put it up to you, and afterwards they'd talk to you afterwards. Next time you'd meet them, they'd talk to you. I came down to Cork, I noticed guys would put up to you, and they'd make a complaint about you afterwards.
Completely different culture.
Oh, I was kind of, wow. So and they wouldn't just put it up to you, they'd come up behind you. So it was kind of, oh, I'll try to sneak in one on you. If I don't get away with that, I'll make a complaint against you.
It's
kind of,
ratty.
whereas at least the Dublin
criminal,
like you mean, it was straight up, come on, let's and
you bet me fair and square, right, respect.
Now, I'm sure there's
changing
not,
again.
I'm sure it's not always, I'm sure there's plenty of fellas that'll come up behind you in Dublin as well, but my experience was that. Now, it helped a lot because when you arrested the guys in Dublin, you went to court with them.
Okay.
And they were then sitting in the court the following morning. You know, now they're kind of facing the judge. Suddenly you're their best friend and kind of, oh, jeez, I'm so sorry, Gavin. You know, if you did him a favour. And that was, whereas a summon system where you summon someone to court 6 months later, they don't remember who the guy is. They don't remember anything about it.
No respect for them.
So, like, I mean, that system where they were in court pretty quickly, it had tremendous advantages from a number
That's
of
interesting. I never considered that.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, so as we wrap it up, does the future of Irish policing worry you?
Not particularly. I mean, the Irish public get the police they deserve. God bless them.
The police are a reflection of the public that's there.
Yeah. You know, like, you mean, the public, most people, all they care about is getting a good job, making lots of money, and spending it on big cars.
So long as that's the culture,
that's the culture.
You're going to get the results of that. You're reap what you sow.
There's no doubt about it. And that goes back to strain theory, is that when the prime objective of people is to, you know, be one of the Kardashians, you know, some people have legitimate means of making money. Other people will find illegitimate means, you know, and as long as you have that, you're going to have a opportunities for people to take shortcuts, and a lot of people do take shortcuts in everything now. So, like, I mean, the police are no different, and it's from the general public that the police force, they're not aliens. They don't come from outer space. They're born and raised in this culture, you know. So, I mean, is there room for improvement? Loads, but the British found that this whole notion of pushing for professionalism comes back to bite you. You know, and if you produce, like everything, if you produce a tick box form for police to fill out, that's exactly what they'll do and nothing else. You know, whereas if as I say, if you get good people and train them well, then you're going to probably end up with a better long-term police force than trying to take in whoever you can and trying to introduce policies and procedures to keep everyone in line. That's never going to be a good practice, you know.
Kevin, thank you very, very much for your time.
You're more than welcome.
Excellent.